All right, first let me start by thanking all of you for being here and extending your time with us to meet my new boss, the Chancellor of the California State University System. Chancellor White, these represent a very small and select group of multiple people who serve on more than 10 of our advisory boards at Cal State San Marcos that range from our foundation board, my university council, my native advisory council, 4 academic college boards, our athletic advisory council, our alumni board, and some of these people are just major business and civic leaders of public school districts and city partnerships that we have. So today they're here to have a conversation with you, and I know continue the unique and special story that we think is Cal State San Marcos, and how, as we grow up, we continue to impact and transform this region. Let me say to all of you that what you probably have read in my new boss's resume is that he is a product of California public schools, has a BA from Fresno State, a master's from East Bay, and a PhD from UC Berkeley. And he's been a professor, a dean, and held 2 presidencies, the most recent one right in our neighborhood at UC Riverside. What I can also tell you that since he's been here since January, and when he said he was going to commit to visiting all 23 universities, I thought both how wonderful and how daunting to go from south to San Diego State and then San Marcos to Humboldt and inland. But he is going to hit that mark before he finishes his 1-year anniversary. And what he understood, and I think what you'll understand after you have this conversation with him, is he knew that to be present on a campus and to engage in conversations and have experiences with students and faculty and staff and community leaders would give him both the unique perspective of each of the CSUs and certainly would help as he leads the hugeness of this California State University system. His excitement and enthusiasm for the CSU is palpable. He is engaged and excited about advocating for our students, about representing and communicating all of the talent that is the faculty of the CSU, and looking at ways to make both the system and through it each of our campuses better and more meaningful. He understands and gets what it means as a first-generation college student, like I am, what it also means to transform the lives of students who come to us and then transform families and transform communities. So I am pleased that you are here for today to help to have this conversation with my boss, the Chancellor of the CSU, Timothy P. White.
My goodness, thank you. Thank you, Karen. If I could give you a raise, I would, but you know. Jim, you need to get another job or something. So when you think of giving thanks, I guess maybe the first place to start, with all due respect to Karen's kind comments, is to you. So I met Luann, and she told me that she watched this place go from rocks and sticks, and somebody else told me about chicken coops, to when I drove up today, I looked at these buildings and I said to myself, man, once we get done with visiting the campus, wherever that is, I want to come back and take a look at what this stuff is. I didn't know this was the campus. So you have to be, as community members, sort of enormously proud of, from chicken coops to edifice. But I hope you're more proud of not the structures, which are beautiful and welcoming, but the students that are in those structures, which I've had a chance to visit with today. So when you visit a campus, it gets set up and mostly driven by the campus, and checking in with Jessica Darren, who's my deputy chief of staff over here, and then or Lars Walton, who's the chief of staff, and they've been flipping off. They can't keep up with this old guy, so they have to do every other one, but I do every one of them. And then I also want to introduce Cindy Fong. Cindy is a UCLA faculty member, but she's also an American College of Education. ACE is a very prominent organization in our work, an ACE fellow, where she has a chance to spend some time with the CSU to help her in her professional development and get some ideas that will help the UC recover from its slump by visiting CSU. That's a joke. So I did a lot of organized visits today, and they were very informative. I saw rats on methamphetamine and rats that were the control group. And they were in these apparatus that were quantifying how many steps and what patterns they did. And then they would, at the end of the experiments, then they would section the brain and study for differences in the neurological pathways of the brain. And these were undergraduate students that were working the cryostat. I mean, I've been a UC guy a lot of my life, both as a student and as a faculty member and then as a senior administrator. The engagement of undergraduate students in the creative enterprise is an amazing asset and strength of the CSUs that then let those men and women decide if that's the direction for them. Plus it gives them, in this case, the San Marcos advantage when they apply to graduate school, saying, oh yeah, I've already published a paper in science. What? You don't see that. So for those of you who have been helping this campus succeed over the years, you should know that you've done good. But it's not the structures, it's the people. The structures are essential for the people to do their work, don't misunderstand. But it's what's going on in there for a guy like me who's been around public education his entire life. You have something really special here. I also think, and Karen knows this because we just did her review, which you know, many of you participated in that. You have a leader of this campus who saw this as an opportunity to create a university of its times. And it sounds a little bit weird, but so many of the campuses are universities of the past, still doing good work, people still learning, getting good degrees, and having meaningful lives. But the way this campus is being laid out, the way they're approaching the curriculum, is having a way to integrate and transcend sort of the normal silos of higher education. I want to come back to you in a second, but I want to tell you about a woman I sat down with that was unscripted. And probably the reason we got here 20 minutes late, which was a shame. I didn't know you were serving wine. I would have been 20 minutes early. We finished something, actually an interview with a TV station. There was a woman sitting on one of the benches in that foyer area, little outdoor area. So there was two things that struck me about her. One is she was reading a book. College kid in the middle of campus reading a book, not eating a burrito, not on this little device, right, but reading a book. And secondly, is she was sitting extremely upright. She had this great posture. And I've got a 9-year-old who likes to slouch, and so I'm paying attention to posture. I was going to, weird, more than you needed to know. But so I sat down with her, and she kind of looked up. And I said, hi, I'm Tim White, and who are you? And she told me. And what's your major? She's an English major. What are you reading? I'm reading a Western. So we talked about the book, and she says she's in some class where she's reading books, and in some cases the movie has been made on this Western, so then they watch the film, and they talk about the sociology of the times, and I mean, so it's intellectual. It's also enjoyable. She goes, I didn't realize how much Western there is in California, and how much I am personally feel like these are stories about me, just at a different time. And then she offered a comment that I want you to hear. I said, so how long have you been here? She said, maybe a couple years. And I said, how's it going? She goes, this is the first year where I felt like everybody is in it together. And I said, what do you mean? And she said, well, I'm an English major, but I understand the nursing students and the kinesiology students and the physics students, we're all actually the same. We're studying different things, but I feel like I'm part of a community of scholars. So then I told her, I said, well, I was with the faculty today and I suggested I'd double your budget. You don't know this. I recanted quickly. If you got rid of your departments and had a San Marcos faculty, keep the majors, get rid of the departments. And so I told her this and she goes, that would be brilliant. She said, because we're actually all studying the same thing, but different parts of the same thing. So think about this 20-something who has been here for a couple years and all of a sudden has figured out that learning and higher education isn't about being a history major or an English major or a physics major, but is becoming a member of society that's enlightened, but part of a global community, regionally, locally, and globally. So you're doing something right, Karen. And finally, I would say that the issues around veteran education, the issues around the partnership with Palomar, for example, with the nursing program, the opportunities those of you in the business community have both thought important for your business and for this community to prosper, but also for these students to prosper, is paying off. Especially during the last handful of years, the word private and public education have been sort of the third rail. But to be honest and to be blunt, we have to have public-private partnerships. And so when I say that, when I visit campuses, sometimes you get this, over my dead body, I want it to be like it was in the 50s. That ain't gonna happen. And we will slide into mediocrity as a system and as a campus if we don't have robust partnerships with the private sector. So to those of you here who figured that out a long time ago, I now actually, when I talk about this, make an important addition to the statement, and I want you to think about this and challenge me on it if it's incorrect. That this is, public-private partnerships are the only way for us to be successful going forward, to retain the public nature of the California State University. And by public nature, I mean accessible to those with the intellect and the willingness to do the work, affordable, and I know we're more expensive, but we're still an amazing value, quality, we can never equivocate on quality, and then a new word for that trifecta to be a quadfecta, I don't know if that's a word, is completion, is get the degree done. One of your students I met today was a soccer player. They just beat Fresno. And when she told me that, she almost vibrated with enthusiasm in the meeting with the students, because that's a higher level of division from the NC2A and this, not literal, this podunk place in San Marcos beats off this D1 giant. How incredible, how powerful that was for her. And so and we talked about completing a soccer game is the same as completing a degree. That you can set up plays, and you can do everything right, but unless you cross that line and get the ball in the goal or get that degree or that certificate, then, and so I know Karen is very insistent on improving students staying in this campus. We call it persistence, or returning students. If they persist, then they're going to get their degree, and that's one of California's biggest challenges, is getting more degrees out in the workplace. And so for me, I think this is a campus that really is a point of pride for the CSU, and not just one of 23 points of pride, but really a special point of pride. The way it has come out of the earth, it's young, but you don't have a sense it's immature, and it has a direction and it has an enthusiasm, and it's now a campus of choice, rather than I couldn't get into Santa Barbara, UC Santa Barbara, so I'm going to go to San Marcos. It's now, I want to go to San Marcos. They're going to support me, and they're going to challenge me, and I'm going to be successful. What a great turning point in the history of this place. And for those of you who saw it back in the day, when you need to feel personally proud of that, and whatever help you've done, more recently rather than early on, but there's others like you who were at the front end who said we need this and went to the mat to get it done. It's going to continue to transform this part of San Diego and Imperial and Riverside County. So let me finish there, Karen, and say, what do you want to talk about?
Thank you. Thank you, Chancellor White. So we have the Chancellor with us until 6 o'clock. So we invite your questions, and Pete's jumping out. And could I just ask you Megan's going to come around with a microphone, and even though we're a small group and it may seem like we don't need mics, since we're being taped here, we want to capture this on the video. So if you would tell the Chancellor again who you are and your affiliation with the university.
Peter York.
In full, complete sentences.
Yes.
I mean, this is the YouTube era, so
My
watch
name,
out.
Peter York, former publisher of the North County Times. Former North County Times, went away about a year ago. Looking into your 5-year crystal ball, or 10, what do you foresee that Cal State San Marcos will be, what do you picture it to look like? And what do you picture the Cal State system to look like?
Yeah, wonderful question. So the 5-year is actually a little easier than the 10. I think the 5-year is a period of economic recovery in California. So that means some stability and predictability in funding for us. It also means some stability and predictability in tuition for our students. While it may eke up a little bit over time, so I don't want to be saying that it's going to stay flat, but it's going to stay flat next year compared to this year. There may be some, there's campuses are interested in student success fees, which create a little extra revenue for the special things that, for example, you have a STEM program here that's currently funded by the National Science Foundation. Those funds are going to run out in another 2.5 years. So, but it's having an enormous impact in getting students who come from poverty or come from poorly performing K through 12 into the science and technology and engineering and math fields to go on into the biotech industry. So value added, but that several $1 million that's supporting that's going to go away in a while. So fees on campus that may raise the cost a little bit are going to support things like that and other things that the president thinks are important. What I think will happen is Karen has a particular commitment to veterans here. So let me talk about this campus before I talk about the system. And San Diego is not in a position to grow. It's in a position to do other things, but getting bigger and having more students isn't one of them. Marginally, yes, but not in the kinds of numbers. And yet this community, excuse me, microphone cough on the side, the mic isn't. Both the absolute number of people in Imperial, North San Diego, South Riverside County are going to grow. So where are they going to go to a 4-year school? It's going to be here. So you're currently 11,000 and some change on head count, 9,000 and some change on full-time equivalents. I don't know what the number will be, but it would not surprise me if in 5 to 10 years you're at 16 to 18,000 students. Almost double what you are now. So that's going to require capital expansion. It's going to require infusing technology in ways we can't even dream about today to create access and quality, in addition to the faculty to create opportunities for students. I think a particular commitment to the veterans is important for a variety of reasons. One, as an American. Two, because of the disproportionate concentration of veterans in this part of the state. And three, in the fact that, I and my wife have a personal commitment to the success of veterans, and we can talk some other time about why that's the case. But wherever we've been, both in Oregon and Idaho and at Riverside, have done some things to help on the basic philosophy of as a veteran has served us. Now it's our opportunity, requirement, and obligation to serve them through higher education to create whatever's next in their life. So I think you have a unique position. You already have roughly 10%, 11, sorry, of your student population that are veterans or veteran dependents. What a special segment of society that deserve us to support them, to challenge the heck out of them, but they've already proven that they can take challenges. So this place will grow, and our questions will be how to finance that. The state has decided to stop capital programs. Very difficult for me to understand that. And so for the last handful of years, the CSU has, and I don't mean this in a pejorative way, it's been a tough time financially, but has sort of wringed its hands saying, what are we going to do? So I told the leadership folks that are responsible for that part of the operation, you know, give me a decision package on a solution, including going out on the market, which is very favorable on interest rates for us. We have very good credit rating. And let's borrow $800 million and then tax ourselves to pay the debt service on that over the next 20, 30 years. We have to build new buildings, and on some campuses that are older than this one, we have to rent, you know, Sacramento State, I visited their learning labs in chemistry. And it's not an issue of leadership at all there, but it's an issue of resources. These labs are really very primitive. They're functional, they're not unsafe, but they're primitive. So what happens is a student leaves that lab using equipment from the 70s and tries to get a job at Gentech, which is using equipment of the modern century, and they have a disadvantage so they in the workplace. So I think what we have to do is make sure that our students are learning in environments, regardless of what their major and career interests are, that give them both the knowledge and skills, in the case where instrumentation is important, instrumentation that's, you know, reasonably contemporary. And then also give them the skill sets to be kind of work ready. And in today's world, that means not only be able to communicate with technology, but actually hold a conversation and look somebody in the eye. It means being culturally competent, to understand if you're going to do business in Asia or with Mexico or with the Latino community or the African, you better understand things that matter, the Native American community, things that matter to the increasingly heterogeneous society that we live in. Well, this is a melting pot for that. What a wonderful place to study, because as I walked around today, there's at least one of each. And guys like me that are mutts, I mean, it's just really amazing how our society is changing. And what more important thing than a university to create the opportunity to learn, like I said, the ABCs, but how to then be culturally competent in this multicultural environment, to have the skill sets of analytical work, creative work, managing ambiguity. I mean, in your business, before you retired, I mean, there are many moments of ambiguity in business. But if, you know, the university is great in creating that in a controlled environment. So when they leave here, they're able to say, okay, we don't know the answer, but that's not a barrier, that's a challenge and an opportunity, right? So that's what I think we have to do. A lot of pressure to bend our cost curve. And I'm all for that. Only if quality is maintained. I do not want to lower the value of the degree for the student or for the business community. And so there's a lot of pressure to bend the cost curve quickly. I think we have to be smart how we bend it. We actually have bent it dramatically. I hate to use numbers in a setting like this, but let me give you two or three that makes the point. The CSU across 23 campuses went from $3 billion state support to $2 billion state support. $3 billion to $2 billion. That's a lot of nickels, right? Double tuition, horrible to do, still a great value. 5 years from now, nobody will care that tuition is $5,500. But those who started at $1,200 and now have to pay $5,000 think it's outrageous. I got that. Down $1 billion, tuition changes and a few other business things brought back in $550 million. So we're still down $450 million from where we were at the beginning of the recession. Like every other business, every other city government. We're not special in this pain. We lost 6% of our workforce, gained about 5%, 4% in students, and the rate of progress to degree went up by about 8 percentage points. So just think what I just said. Less money, we got that. Fewer people, understand that. More students to teach, and we're more successful if graduation rates mean anything, which they do. So for those who want to say that CSU was not responsive and is fat and lazy and feeling, like they were special, et cetera, the facts contradict that. But we're still well down in our resources with more students and fewer employees. So now as we get more resources, we're still digging out of a hole, and the challenge for me and for Karen and for the 22 other Karens in the system is let's not rebuild what used to matter. Let's rebuild what matters for the future. So we're not going to just throw money back at things that were cut without asking the question, where's the puck going to be 10 years from now in the North San Diego, Imperial County, South Riverside community? And what do we need to put in place here programmatically to meet that need? And I think that's a really great opportunity for us. Across the system, we turn away this last fall, my first fall, we turned away 25,000. It's hard to know precisely, so it's somewhere between 20 and 30. 25,000 fully qualified California residential students because there's no room at the inn. What a violation. Families have sacrificed, the kids gone to school, done the A to G requirements, got a good SAT score or ACT score, did community service to prove that they're giving beyond self. Family took out a second mortgage, got 3 jobs for 2 people, and there's no room at the inn. And as I look for the next 10 years, unless things change, that's going to be an annual story. What a lost generation of young men and women, and not so young men and women. So what's going to happen to them is we say, go to Palomar College. You go to Palomar, great place, but it's got the same issues. The classes aren't available, and there are more students and less faculty, and so we're kind of broken right now as a public policy about the importance of this public education business. And when I grovel for resources, I'm not groveling to be greedy and to feather our nest. I'm groveling to serve the next generation of Californians to get out there and grow our economy and move up social mobility and be less reliant on social services and criminal justice system. I mean, the evidence is overwhelmingly clear. For every dollar the state spends on us as a system, we return $5.62 into the state economy on an annual basis. I don't know how your investments have done. Spoken from a banker, she said that's pretty good, right? But our story isn't sticking well, and the problem is our elected officials understand our importance and give lip service to it. But then when it gets down to the brass knuckles negotiations, we don't have enough oomph compared to other parts of the state economy, point one. And point two, nor does the UC, by the way. And point two is back of everybody's mind, if the state doesn't fund us adequately, we have a relief valve, and that's raised tuition. We have a very robust financial aid program. We're very proud of the fact that only about 45% of our students leave CSU with a debt. So the national discussion of $1 trillion student debt load, more than credit card debt, is true, but CSU isn't leading that effort. We're actually the model for society about how we keep debt down And of those that do have debt, the average is $16,000. It's a lot of money. But that's $2,000, almost $3,000 less than the public university average in California, and fully 25% less than the national public school average for debt. So 40% of our students have debt, and it's below California's average and the country's average by 12% in California and 24% nationally. Bad debt, hate to have debt, but we're actually doing a good job. How do we get that story to stick as a positive story rather than a negative story? That's sort of the, you're out of the newspaper. How do I tell my story better? We'll talk later. Thank you. Important question.
Question over here, Cammie.
A couple of questions, but when you were speaking on capacity, one of the things that I've been baffled by is here when we've had capacity, there was still a limit on the students we could take in, full-time students, without being penalized or having funds taken away. And if we're looking at creative partnerships and resources coming from new areas that can help build that capacity, we're still penalized. And I just wanted to hear your vision on how that can be right-sided.
I don't know. I actually like to be punitive. So, you must have insider baseball knowledge. Just last week, we spent some time with all the presidents and my senior staff talking on this very issue. And so, without getting into the weeds, let me tell you what I think the moving parts are. And I'm still trying to figure it out, to be honest. So, we get a chunk of money out of Sacramento, and we charge a chunk of money to our students. So it's roughly $5,500, or let's just round it up and call it $6,000 from the state and $6,000 from the student. Those are rack rates. Now let's keep financial aid out because it makes it. So if you're a student, Jan, you bring with you $12,000, and we teach you and so forth. But we've also admitted Luann, and the state says, we can't pay anymore. So Luann comes in, because Karen's kind, admits her. So all we get is her $6,000, but we don't get $6,000 from Sacramento. So we'd call Luann an unfunded student. Now we can't identify which student is unfunded by the state, and only her contribution through tuition pays for her opportunity, and which ones are funded. We don't put red A's on people's chests and say, So when the state looks at us, they say, okay, we funded, it's actually up to $340,000, but let's make the concepts easy for me to explain. The state says, we're funding 1,000 students. And Jiminy Christmas, Tim, you have 1,050 students. And you're teaching them we're only funding you for this much, and you're teaching this many more students, 5% more students. Maybe we should cut you more and you'll teach them. So that's the political environment, right? That if we're able to accommodate out of our commitment to the purpose, a lot of students that the state doesn't fund, it takes away the motivation for the state to fund the needs of California. So that's the reason why this penalty system has been in place for some years, one I didn't create. But it's trying to say to the Karens of the world, doggone it, you got to manage your enrollment. And if the system enrollment gets way above what the state's paying, how do we go to Sacramento and grovel for resources, say we need them when they say, why do you need them? You're already teaching them on the money you're already getting. And in fact, this last legislative session, there was an attempt again, both in Cal State and UC, to reset the baseline. And we pushed that back because our feeling is that that's an inappropriate commitment of the state to all of a sudden lower the commitment per student because our costs are going up with healthcare, just like every other business. So that's I think the overall issue. And the only way to get presidents in line is to penalize them, right? Now, I want to change it around. I want to change it around to incent Karen to recruit students who are going to have a higher level of retention and persistence and get to degrees sooner. Why would I let, I mean, it doesn't make sense to me to admit more students and then take away resources to teach those students. So therefore, they can't get through in 4 years, no matter how smart they are. So we're going to change, it's going to take a bit to figure this out because we're so big. But we're trying to say to Karen, get better graduation rates, get more completions, increase your persistence, get rid of the gaps between racial and ethnic and poverty income gaps. But if you do that and therefore you have more students, we're going to take your money away. I mean, that is an unsustainable business model. So it's the one I've inherited. And so this year we're going to continue the penalty system. Next year, Karen, I talked to her about this morning, she's actually probably got it today, a letter that says, Karen, how much do you want to grow here for next year? And then I'm asking that of all the campuses. And then I'll decide. The bigger campuses may not grow very much at all, or they may want to, and I may say no because I want the smaller campuses to get more critical mass. This is 10,000, roughly, rough number. We have Channel Islands at 3,600. I mean, they have the same fixed cost as San Marcos. But they only have 3,600 students. Well, they got to get up to 5,000 and then 8,000 and then 10,000. Then they're going to have enough resources to do a better job. I want to move to excuse me. I want to move to an incentive way to incent retention and graduation and make sure resources come in that motivate campuses to do that better. That'll serve California. And get away from the penalty system that says you're doing all the right things and as a consequence I'm going to take your resources away.
I would just, and I don't mean to hog it, but I think there's one other piece that I would like to see is almost to encourage that entrepreneurial spirit of that public-private partnership. So yes, in that vein, but then what if $1 meets with $3 because you have other revenue sources? So instead of being penalized, it's like, wow, you give us this state, but look how much we've been able to raise. So we've been able to build capacity because of your funds, we've been able to do this. And so we increase the graduation, everything that you're saying, and we reduce the time, but we've also been able to engage a community in creative fashion and really fan that entrepreneurial spirit. So
I'm good with that, but the slippery slope here is in the kind of world we live in. Nobody's, well, heck, if San Marcos can raise all this money, let's take that equal amount of money away from the state. So they're just fine, thank you. And so part of my job is to say nonsense to that, and I will, and we'll be successful in that. But it's a very interesting world this system is in. But I could not agree with you more. We need to incent good behaviors rather than penalize, and we need to create public-private partnerships as markers of excellence, not as substitute dollars for the state's obligation to educate this thing. So we're actually working on coming back with a model that says, okay, California, we need this many graduates by 2020. CSU will provide this percentage of that need for our economy. This is what it's going to cost. This is what we have. This is what the state should pay. This is what our students will pay. Are you in or not? And just do it as a business model for all the right reasons. And then if they don't, then that's where the community stands up and says, why are you, I'm a taxpayer. Why aren't you doing what's logical? The governor at the last trustees meeting, it was both accurate and frustrating. And I'm not picking on Governor Brown at all. But he pointed out that the CSU and the UC and the community colleges don't have the same I mean, he was being engaging and funny about this, but there's an element of truth, because he just had to pay a lot of money for the criminal justice for the prison system. He says, you know, you guys don't have the lawsuit to force me to give you more money, you know, to force the state to give you more money. In so many respects, we thought maybe we'll take on Solano Prison as Solano State University, and then, you know, but his point was that the state resources are being forced to go to some of the state supports because of the legal circumstance and the fact there's federal judges making those decisions for us, because as a state we've not done well enough in their view. We don't have that clout, and there is a finite amount of money, and all of us personally and in our businesses do realize the importance of living within your means. But what drives me crazy is the 20 or 30,000 students who are turning away, and what's going to happen to them. And you and I are going to pay for them, because they're not going to have the kind of careers. They're going to have twice the unemployment that a college graduate has. Chances are they're going to end up using social services, and chances are they're going to be incarcerated along the way. And it's an ecosystem that is out of balance. So,
I'm going to ask you a positive thing and then turn this over to anyone else. But
I'm also very bullish on our future.
yes,
I realize the complexity of the world we're in. I'm actually very, very bullish on.
I'm confident in you.
Yeah.
So you obviously have 23 campuses, and you've spent time here in San Marcos. And I'm sure you want to look at opportunities for best practices to be shared. What stands out uniquely here compared to some of the other campuses that possibly you'd like to share? And then here
Yeah, I think one of the things that you've done very well is engaged learning. I met kinesiology students today, 800 majors, so one of the larger majors, and they were interested in their studies around, you know, human movement and its implication for public health and rehabilitation and all the clinical and societal applications. But they also do some amazing food drives. I think it was, I can't think of the acronym, but basically these students, and they have several hundred, you know, that do these drives, giving out, excuse me, my goodness. But in every, you know, in the nursing program, in the business community, I sat down and there were 3 professionals from Harrah's Rincon and 7 business students. And the students are figuring out how Harrah's Rincon is going to do their internship program. Value add. Harrah's is looking for great San Marcos students ultimately to be employees. So they want to create an internship program that works and allows a student to test drive working for Harrah's, and for Harrah's to decide among all these students, I'm going to hire you because you've got the moxie, the smarts, the attitude to be successful in our business. And they do this with all sorts of businesses in this community. A lot of campuses don't do that. That's a best practice for 2 reasons. One, it helps the business community, the quality of life around the campus. Secondly, it makes the learning experience of those students so much more relevant. It becomes the San Marcos advantage. I did this. This is what I did. Put that on that young resume. You differentiate yourself from all the other smart, bright, good-looking, aspirational students who come out. So it creates an opportunity for them to have a better learning environment. I think many, but not all campuses, but San Marcos is really a model. The number of undergraduates, when I visited the life sciences stuff this morning with these meth-treated rats, there was an undergraduate kid in the cryostat cutting brain sections at 40 microns deep and putting them in vials. There was an undergraduate student who made me put on a lab coat, and purple gloves, and thought she was teaching me how to vortex a test tube with spleen cells to run through a flow cytometer to do spectral analysis of drugs. I kind of blew her away when I said, I can do that. And she didn't know I'd run labs for most of my academic career, so I could vortex with the best of them. You know, this is a little machine that you take a test tube, it's got a cap on it, and you press down and this machine oscillates like this and then mixes up the stuff, and then you stick it in the analyzer. And we actually used to have contests in my lab about how many test tubes could you vortex at once without breaking them. So she didn't know I was a vortex expert. And her eyes got really big and the smile got pretty when she saw me vortex. But the fact is that these undergraduate kids are working with equipment and learning techniques. I mean, how many of you at your undergraduate level did flow cytometry? Or used a cryostat to section 40 micron brain sections, right? So I think that's a best practice because it lets them know are they material for medical school or graduate school, or to go into a research lab at a local biotech place, pharmaceutical company, or not. And if they're interested in that stuff, then they have the chance of being part of a publication or an abstract or a national meeting that again differentiates them from all the other smart life sciences kids who sat in the back of the class and got A's but didn't do anything in the lab. And those are best practices as well. And then I think the final one is, and I don't know where it's emanating from, when I visited with the veteran students, I went into the Veteran Center and chatted with several students. It may just be the San Diego DNA, I don't know. I think it's more than that. To where they felt respected, understood, challenged, and supported. Now, if you're, I don't know how many veterans we have, and especially those who served, in Vietnam, came back to a pretty hostile community. Now veterans are coming back to a much more supportive community around them as individuals, irrespective of people's feelings about the conflicts in Iraq and Afghanistan. But they're carrying burdens that are different than the orthopedic injuries of earlier wars that affect learning, that affect the ability to interact with civilians. And Karen's shop here has figured that out. And with the new facility that's on its way, will really become a model. It feels good as an American, but also helps these men and women get back in. And we talk frankly about, you come out of a very regimented environment. Now you're a skateboard, As one vet told me, he says, it just drives him crazy. He gets to class on time and these kids come in 10 minutes late. And he said he's suppressed it, but he wants to go up to him and slap him upside the head and say, what's the matter with you? Don't you know the opportunity, And so I said, well, don't slap him upside the head, but go have a beer with him and just talk about what it means to be punctual. I said, you may not get any of them, but you may get 2 of them, and you're going to make it. And he just kind of smiled. He's a big African-American guy who was a Marine and had served, and then the burdens that they, so I can go on and on, but I think that Sacramento State has a really nice Veterans Center, San Bernardino the same. Mm-hmm. This one could become the model for everybody. And it is the challenge, but it's the respect and support piece and the understanding piece that they're carrying things either physically or emotionally that need attention. And sort of a case study, you can't treat them all the same. You got to get comfort where they can disclose what they're carrying and you can test it out and then support it. That'll be a best practice. That is and will become even more so.
Thank you. And by the way, that's Cami Madsen with Cox Communication and is a member of the President's University Council. And then we got one more hand up, so if we can indulge you for just a few more minutes and then get you on your way. Brenda Hall for North County Professional Development Federation. Brenda.
Thank you. I have the privilege, as Jan said, of serving that consortium, and it's 25 school districts from the region, along with the county office and this university. And I have to say, this university had the foresight to start that group not too long after the chicken coops were removed, 22 years ago. So they've been working collaboratively and providing resources and sharing that work with the districts in the area, which has been great. But recently, or over the last several years, a number of those districts have entered into guaranteed admission agreements with this university. And that interest, I think, continues to grow. So I was just wondering what your view is on that, and how you
Right.
see that as a regional piece here in this area.
Well, it kind of goes back to, first of all, I applaud that relationship. This is the PACE program, right?
There are actually seven agreements with our public
Okay.
schools. That's one of them.
It kind of ties back to the earlier question about capacity and sort of it just grates me and it grates Karen to turn away qualified students. I mean, there's something about predictability that is like a social contract. If I go to school as a middle school kid and I get into high school and I take the AG requirements and I do all this and I get good grades and I'm interested in going on, the idea of having predictability that you're going to get in seems like, in the world of push-pull, mom and dad, family, church, the community are pushing the kids to be successful in the K through 12. But there's this vacuum at the end that's saying, come on, you do what you need to do there, you can do this with us. That seems so right to me, particularly the complexity of our students today. I mean, there's a lot of things that are unpredictable in their lives, but if we can make education predictable beyond 12th grade, based on performance, based on aptitude, based on work ethic, there's nothing wrong with that. So I would endorse those kind of relationships. And we have one in Long Beach, it's called the Long Beach Promise. Same sort of thing through the public schools and the community college into Cal State Long Beach. Fullerton just did one with not Mount Sac, but with Saddleback Community College. So I think more and more are engaging either with the community college or the K through 12 system. There's been legislation, AB 1440 recently, which is encouraging, doesn't have a penalty yet, coming back to penalties, but ultimately probably will, to create sort of community college transfer programs that work the way the master plan was intended back in the 60s. That if you get out of K through 12, you go to a community college, you do this, this, and this, you're guaranteed admission into a Cal State. The biggest difficulty we have is demand is here and capacity is here. And as you look at the next decade, that's not going to change. So how do we solve that for those individuals, but also for California? And I think we haven't got the answer yet. Part of it is technology. Part of it is getting students in sooner. It drives me, I have to be blunt here, we have a lot of students who earn a 120 credit degree with about 200 units. Now, this doesn't seem right to me. I can understand 130 or 140, you tried one major, it didn't work, you tried something else. Or you stubbed your toe and you had to take it twice. One D and one B, and why do we allow 3 majors and 4 minors, right? Look, kiddo, 1 major and 1 minor, or 2 majors. You choose. But on the public dole, that's the rule, right? So we've got to get students to complete the game, as your soccer player student was talking with me today, in a way that's reasonable, but not carte blanche. Because the students that are hanging around trying different things or gaming the system to get financial aid, right, and not really making progress to degree, are A, hurting themselves in the long run, and B, keeping somebody else out. So the beauty of these partnership programs is it creates much more of a sort of a throughput with expectations of performance. And that just seems reasonable to me when we're in a situation of capacity being less than demand, which is going to be the next decade. So I like them, and congratulations for thinking about their importance. And as a family, the predictability and the sacrifices that parents make, especially first gen or those from middle class or lower middle class or poverty, say, you know, I'm willing for my kids' sake to work 2 jobs because Juanita is going to go to CSU San Marcos. And I'm going to make sure she does good grades in high school. But then I'm comforted to know that there's no ambiguity at the end. What a difference in the conversation around that family, the mom and dad making that sacrifice. And I think that's the powerful lesson in our changing demographics of California, and particularly the southern part of California, is giving that predictability to families, motivate that kid, motivate that family to continue to make those sacrifices, and then get them in here so Karen can make them smart, culturally competent, and capable to go out and change that family's life and the community from which they come. That's the master plan working well. And we've let it, as a society, get, like me, I'm a product of the master plan. I'm a little gray around the edges and a little wrinkled and a little, you know, slow moving. We need to revitalize this thing. The concept is sound. The resources to support it need to be there. And we need to do a better job of using technology, bending the cost curve, being accountable. And that's really what the leadership of these campuses are doing, and I'm committed to doing so. Great question, thank you.
So Chancellor White, in closing, as you look out at this room of community leaders, all of whom are great supporters of the CSU in general and CSUSM in particular, what do you leave them with as your number one call to action for them?
Number one. Can it be a run-on sentence?
Of course. It can be anything you want it to be.
Stay engaged, comma. Stay expecting us to do better, comma. Support the leadership in creating opportunities for faculty, staff, and students, comma. And as the Dean of Science gave me a pin today, keep calm and boldly go. I guess a little bit of Star Wars in there. But in London, you know, you can buy these coffee mugs that the Queen Mum puts out that says, keep calm and carry on. Well, for San Marcos, it's not carry on, it's boldly go.
Okay.
That's
Great.
my run-on
Love
sentence.
it. Thank you very much.